Just because you are unable to move or unable to speak for yourself does not mean you don't have a voice of your own. Well, we are here ready to listen. To a degree, I think when people have had traumatic experiences with their mental health and their whatever traits that have kind of occurred throughout their life, that sometimes you kind of disconnect from the physical environment so much. And I shared while completely being held and seen by individuals I'd never met, by people that came into my chat that all I knew of them really was a moniker, was their username, and they held me and they saw it and they shared their own stuff, and it was an amazing space.
So Beat Cleaver, first of all, welcome properly, officially to the podcast side of things. Last time you and I spoke, it went for slightly longer than your average podcast episode, and we went off on every tangent available, for reasons that will become very obvious once we start actually trying to stay on one point. There's actually a question I need to get out of my brain before I actually even let you do your intro though, which is, I've only been thinking this. Do you know a single neurotypical beatboxer? For those on the podcast, his pupils just dilated.
Arguably, absolutely not. I mean, I hold very much in the same philosophy as you, as I think the idea of neurotypical is now almost out of the window. I feel like diversity has residence in everybody. and so like therefore I think like the art of getting into beatbox and all that, I think it kind of requires a bit of a neurodivergent trait to like really kind of feel the worth of it or something, really, and to put that energy into it.
Yeah, it's only since our last chat that your last chat, basically the people on the podcast know this because I talked about it on a solo show a couple of weeks back, about how your chat was like, I was like, what? That's not normal. What? That's an ADHD thing. That's a neurodiverse thing. For me, I have my bipolar, which was my emotions, and then my personality and weird little things that I do, one of which being playing with stimming and all this stuff. And I didn't even know until I spoke with you that what I was doing was even stimming. And since then, I've gone back and have figured out like some of what the earliest stimming and stuff was. And it was beatboxing before beatboxing was even a name. Like I remember as a kid, like it was like a waltz that me nan used to sing. It's like do 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 do. Like it was like an old sort of 1950s, 1940s waltz that me nan used to sing, and I used to do it where I'd hum the noise, the melody in my throat whilst I'm going boom, 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 boom,
yeah.
And I'd be making these two noises together, and I was kind of obsessed with how many noises I could make, like at the same time. And it was
a beatboxer.
And I was walking with my wife, and she's just like, you just don't stay quiet, dear. And I was just like, because I'd just be like, every now and then a nice little motorbike just went past. That wasn't me beatboxing.
Oh, that wasn't me.
No. But there's this weird little elephant noise that I make. I just randomly just go like, as in just to fill silence. And then I thought about it, and I thought, like, of all the beatboxers I know, I don't know a single one of them that's neurotypical. And I'm like, I mean, there probably is people that have picked it up since, like it became popular. But I think I would go as far as to posit my theory that it was invented from stimming.
Mm-hmm. So I was waiting to kind of jump in on this because I completely agree. It is vocal stimming. It is completely vocal stimming. That is basically what beatbox comes from. There's so much sonic interaction that's going on with your body. You're physically really engaging with it as well. And then like one of my favorite words in the fucking world. Oh, shouldn't be swearing already.
I told you could swear. It's fine. I said we want to keep it clean, like on topic.
Is echolalia, and that's effectively what you're doing. Like when you heard that waltz track, and then you kind of like you end up stimming along to that kind of thing, and it's echoing your surroundings, and that is something that's like rooted in communication for thousands of years. This isn't like a beatbox term or even like a neurodivergent term. It's just like this is something that we've always known is an integral part of how we communicate with the universe. And then when you talk about neurodivergent people, how they mimic their surroundings and their sounds and things like that. That's just all beatbox. That's all beatbox is. It's just like, okay, so how can we copy these integral musical parts and then like throw a random word in there, or not even a word, just like a blah, or whatever, and chuck that in. And all of that is definitely within stimming. So like in essence, yeah, if we categorize stimming as being a neurodivergent trait, then we all are. We all are.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I figured you'd have some thoughts on that, right? So now let's get the rewind and let's actually start with. Right, and I think I explained this to you before. I know you know that I've asked all of these questions of you last time, but this time I'm going to ask them in an order-ish, and we're going to have like 45 minutes of content. And then if anyone's listening to the podcast on this and you've still never been along to a stream, come along. It's a little bit chaotic. It gets a little bit interesting in places, but quite frankly, it goes to some beautiful places too. And Beat and I will have been talking substantially more after we actually hit end on the podcast section of it. So for the podcast audience, because everyone in chat knows who you are, who is Beat Cleaver?
Well, Beat Cleaver, I guess, is a friendly neighborhood alien in charge of a spaceship of the imagination. That is my stream intro. That is generally how I answer. But so I'm a beatboxer and a live loop artist. I'm an improv musician, which means I make up music on the spot, which really helps with me having neurodivergent traits because it feels right. But I'm also, within that, I'm a mental health and neurodiversity advocate, and I've worked professionally with neurodiverse young peoples for past 10 years now, doing kind of support within behaviors that challenge in education, supporting individuals into mainstream or vice versa, doing creative workshops and well-being workshops, utilizing like beatbox and general arts in self-regulation. And I am a kind of undiagnosed, potentially ADHD, potentially autistic, not quite sure where I fit into the branches of the neurodiversity tree, but very comfortable being there now.
Beautiful. Unfortunately, with your intro, you just answered every question on my book. There we go. We're done. We nailed it. Podcast.
Right,
solid. Okay. Well, let's as you've just said, branches on that tree. Let's just delve into a few of those branches that you've just talked about there. So, number one. Talk to me about your kind of early stages and about like how like, you know, you're seeing traits that you looking back now of where the early stages of neurodiversity kind of came up and were obvious and apparent for you. Well, maybe weren't obvious at the time, but what they are now.
I think so. In terms of my the way that other people perceived me and the way that other people treated me was probably my first indicators, though they weren't really very apparent to me until much later in my life, really. But easily, very early on. So in primary school, I was always labelled as a talker. Or in a sense of like, he's a lovely little boy, but he doesn't half talk, which is just like, it's a classic move. It's a classic thing. And it's a classic in like a little village primary school where there maybe isn't a great deal of SEN. Obviously, you know, this is, you know, over 20, 22, 23 years ago or whatever. And it was always just this, oh yeah, he likes to fidget. He likes to fidget a lot. He doesn't sit still. Oh, and he draws on his hands a lot. He always chews pens to death and stuff like that. And it was always like these levels of like, well, this is my everyday experience. None of that stopped. Like no amount of masking or anything like that was ever gonna drown out any of these kind of behaviors. This is who I am and who I've always been. So I guess, yeah, indicators were very early on. But as an understanding, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So what were some of your early ways of coping with those indicators?
Unfortunately, I basically just obeyed them. So in terms of all those behaviors, I just never stopped. I was really not very good with authority in any sense of the word. I'm not very good with being demanded of in almost any way, like usually structures of demands in my life. And then
there's me coming straight into your stream and asking you to come on here in front of a live audience.
That's not a demand. That's not a demand. That was
it's emotional blackmail.
A wonderful invitation, because it's like, I could, I've been working on my boundaries. I could have been like, actually, no, mate, I'm all right. Fuck you. Like, no, I love you. I love your stream and everything you stand for. So of course it's an absolute privilege to be on here.
I've really got to stop. On a side note, I've got to stop doing that though, because I've realized recently I'm like just slip into a person's DMs when they're not live, because I'm like, if you ask them in front of an audience, like there's definitely a little bit. I know if someone asks me in front of an audience, it's like, it's harder for me to show boundaries to a person in chat, because people are watching me show the boundaries. And although maybe that should be a good thing, because people need to see examples of actually what it can be like to show boundaries. For me, performative I know I'm not performing to an audience for that purpose, but the fact that it's like there's certain parts of the stream, I won't go into suicide prevention on stream anymore, because I did that like 3 times. And then I felt like I had an audience watching me whilst I was helping a person out of crisis, and that just felt really wrong.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a weird one in terms of that. But then it's like, it's funny because like I'm reasonably self-aware, but I'm not perfect at it. And it sometimes takes me a little while to go, holy shit, you're a hypocritical piece of crap, because the thing that you don't like people doing to you, you've just done it. So I'm like, right, okay, this is me kind of saying, I acknowledge that part of me now, and I'm not going to be asking people to do things whilst they're live anymore, because that's just naughty. Anyway. As you were so we've done it. I've done it. It was me. It's not your fault. You were answering a question. The question was about, surrendering to the boundaries, and you said that, surrendering to the tendencies, and how you didn't really take authority very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I think the worst that these kind of traits really manifested and actually caused me distress and stuff was way into secondary school, and I went to an all boys, very archaic, very traditional style of schooling. There was a lot of like kind of casual elitism and that kind of level of like, you are privileged to be here. Well, I passed a test when I was 11 that was like not really that difficult, but I was kind of pressured to do it anyway. And so basically my main route of regulating at that point was escapism. Mm-hmm. So I truanted like hell. Like it came around to my last years, my quote unquote most important years, where the highest levels of pressure were, I was not there. I was like 22% attendance or something over the 2 years, which was crazy. And I got expelled during my GCSEs, sadly, which in the essence is like, it actually worked out the best thing for me. I'm a very big believer in the whole synergy of the situation. It wasn't going to go any other way. But in terms of understanding, like, I still had no comprehension really of like what kind of identity that might mean for me. I was just like, I had the pressure applied to me, obviously, like I was neurotypical, or like I was treated, in a kind of unified manner. I was treated exactly the same as everyone else. However, when the resources in my school were the 2 student support members that we had were 2 ex-police officers, and they were very much good cop, bad cop. Okay. A very casual, gentle guy, and then a bit more of a brash, like kind of guy. And it was like there was no counselling. And I had my first experience of really severe mental health when I was in school. And basically one of the days that I was having a crisis, I was put into a room with a football and just punch that out for a minute and then go back to class. And it was like, oh, really? I'm cured. Thank you so much, bad cop. You're a legend. Which obviously, it was not the way. And it was only until my professional life begun that neurodiversity really came into my life. I think like it really became a thing of like understanding communication needs and all these different individuals and how they interact with the universe. And then I started relating more and more. And, like I said, I was working in that area for like 10 plus years. And I just got more and more senses of belonging with individuals I was supporting rather than this support workers, which was a really interesting feeling. And got introduced into stimming. Or Stim toys. I was stimming already, but like it was like, oh, actually, here's something specific for this kind of thing. It's like, yes, Yes, I love it.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons that I use this little thing that's off my. It's the bevel off my light. But there were toys of this, but they were like you switch them inside out, and then they were little slime things, and you put them on the table, and then they pop up.
Yeah.
And like most kids would be like playing with that, putting it on the table, and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, I'd be like just playing with it, turning it inside out. In fact, Oasis, the drink.
Yeah.
Originally, Oasis caps had one of those seals, the popper seals, where you break it. And also, I figured out that if you took the Oasis lid and you pushed on the inside of it, you could actually switch it. So it's rather than just going blah 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 blah, you could switch it so it actually could push hard through like that. And then you could be the one that clicked it back rather than it doing it as and when it wanted to. So, like, honestly, I had Stim toys from a ridiculously young age. They weren't Stim toys. It was just auto. Like, for example, I don't know if I can still do this. It's been a little while, but let's see. There we go.
Oh yeah.
So I learned to do that when I was about 20. It's like some of the stimming did actually was a bit of a problem. Like, I've got this gap on my beard here, and for some bizarre reason I can't leave it alone.
I did the same.
But it's only that one area. Oh, well, there's that one area, and there's a couple of various places that there are hairs. And weirdly, wherever I'm going bald is where I seem to want to do it, which is just like, no, like you must hold on to it. It's precious. It's getting rid of itself. I don't need to help it. But yeah, it's all of these things. And again, just like what you said there, and I think this is really important for people to kind of educate themselves and be integrated with people that are on the spectrum, or people who are neurodivergent, because you actually start to realize that, like you said before, and like I'm gonna die on this hill now. I think the one thing I think about the neurotypical and neurodivergent thing.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Apparently, see, I'm gonna die on this hill, but Siri's having trouble hearing me. Is the idea about like I think. Like for my wife, for example, right? Yeah, you're listening downstairs, honey. Basically, she is neurotypical, but there are things about her personality and the way she does things, and not just the way she does things because that's her personality, the compulsion to do things a certain way. There's a certain amount of stubbornness that the more she tries to override, the more that she fights with it. She actually is sometimes envious of the fact that when I walk away from a mess, or when I walk away from like a load of stuff, it's not on my mind until it's back in front of me again, and it's like forgotten about. I can have a year, 2 years where I don't see a friend and not feel guilty about the fact that I've not seen that person, and then when we see each other, it's like we never stop seeing each other. Whereas she feels a lot. Yeah, she feels a lot of pressure to keep up with people on a regular basis. In fact, I don't really get along with people that want overly regular contact. Like I can't deal with it. I actually can't handle it, and I find it to be overbearing. But because I'm like dead nice and don't like confrontation and stuff, I just kind of try and get it around to my level. And it's like people are like, I want to be friends with you. It's like, okay, sweet, communicate with me as often as my other friends do, which is like once every 6 months. But she's got the opposite of that. And the thing is, in the same way that is what's completely and utterly right for me, that's what's completely and utterly right for her, but she doesn't necessarily like 100% of it. And the thing is it comes down to that big question that when you fill in any forms on this, because obviously I've done it for depression and for bipolar and stuff, and now I've done it for ADHD as well on the form. It asks the question, to give you a score, the question is, how much does this impact your day-to-day life? So me stimming, how much does that impact my day-to-day life? Not at all. People have said I'm a fidget before, but no one's ever, because my stims are kind of like, they're not seriously overt. It's not like they're not like tics. In fact, well, there's a line between stims and tics, isn't there? But they're not tics, so no one's ever pointed out that these aren't necessarily a problem. No one's ever called me weird because I play with toys or whatever. People have accused me of not paying attention when actually this thing's helping me pay attention to you. It's like without this thing, like it's going to be my feet that are moving away from you. It's like, but yeah, the same thing is that those things, it's like, well, you'd never go and see a doctor about that, would you? You'd never go and see a doctor about, you know what? I see the mess in the kitchen, and then I leave the kitchen, and I've got work to do for the rest of the day, but the whole day that kitchen's on my mind. People say, well, that's just normal. And it's like, and it's the same, like, I feel bad for not catching up with my friends like as often as I could, but she's also got a really big social circle. I've got a massive one now thanks to streaming, but before that I had like 4 friends, like 4 like really close friends, and then a lot of kind of tertiary friends and stuff. And it's like, but the thing is, like, she's never going to go and see a doctor to say, "Oh, I feel bad because I don't get on," because that doesn't impact my life. It doesn't stop me from doing my day-to-day work, and it actually doesn't, because you've just said that in the back of your mind whilst you're trying to work. Those dishes are out there. I can't even remember what dishes I'd left today. I might have not have even left any for all I know. I don't know. I'll go down there after I finish streaming and I'll clean it. Like, but the thing is, it's not distracting me from now, and so it's in a weird way. That's these are things that neurotypicals say. Again, all neurotypicals are different, all neurodivergence are different, but it's like it's just things that have been diagnosed. Like what is the actual typical? Like what is what is the actual typical? And if that's the typical, then surely all typicals' brains work exactly the same way. Because if they don't, they diverge. It's just by how much.
Yeah. That's exactly it. It's this idea of box fitting, isn't it? That just doesn't apply. And I really picked out with what you were saying about you and your partner, and your different attitudes towards like the environment and stuff. And it's like I feel very much this way as well, where I kind of differentiate between my physical environment and my mental environment.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? So like my mental environment is the thing that gets more about fixation, and it gets more into my head, and it distracts me and stops me doing things and makes me feel bad, or all these kind of things. It's like I'll look down and be like, oh yeah, I didn't wash up that thing I used earlier. I'll forget about it the second I turn around as well. And then I'll fill up my water bottle at the same time while looking at it and going, and put it on the side, and then forget that as well. Come up. That's why exactly happened as I sat down for the stream. Sat down, I'll reach my water and like, oh yeah, left it downstairs. Oh, again. Okay, right, quick, run. And I think like to a degree, I think when people have had traumatic experiences with their mental health and then their whatever traits that have kind of occurred throughout their life, that sometimes you kind of disconnect from the physical environment so much, and it doesn't bother you as much. It's like when people say you live in your own mess, and it's kind of your organized chaos, and it's like I'm sure we're very much the same. This space right here, what you can see, looks lovely. Looks so clean. Can't see all the other stuff down here, all the stuff littering my desk, all the stuff around my feet, like the Mindalorian helmet.
I've got my Jack Skellington hat.
That is not mess in any way. That is an essential part of the kit.
I've got 3 other pieces of headgear down there and a boomerang, though. But all of them are actually relevant to streams. So
cheeky indoor boomerang.
I may also have 3 pairs of sunglasses over here. I have 2
and they're useless.
There's nothing left in this, and it was 2 days ago. Although it's purple, so it fits in with the color scheme.
I relate. When after your birthday, when we all appeared on your stream and we were all chilling and chatting in there, I had a beer that night. I put the beer on my radiator over here, the empty beer. I think that must have been 2 weeks. I never put empties over here either. So like that was a part of thing in my head where I was like, I don't even acknowledge this space in my life. And then it was just like my partner pointed out, it was like, how long has that been there? It's like, oh, well, that was Dave's birthday. That must have been like 3 days ago. So, babe, that was like 3 weeks ago. So,
yeah, Dave's birthday is the 20th of February. When is it now? It is. Well, no, that's fine. It's the 23rd of February. Yeah, 2022.
It's looking a bit blue.
Amazing. That was a good night. That was probably the most chaos the stream's ever been. That was a very much a delete this VOD instantly kind of situation.
Fabulous. Not until you got all the clips out of it though.
Yeah, I got clips.
That equal balance of like inspiring and kind of like what?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit dark.
We had 7 comedians, like 7 American stand-ups at that. It's like, of course it was going to get that dark, and then we had jigs in, so it was bound to get sexual at that point. Speaking of 7 comedians, guess who's on next week? Justin.
Thanks, jokes. Oh, Justin, nice.
Yeah. Justin's on next week, so I might see if I can get him to sing stuff that's not DMCA-able while he's here. But yeah, anyway, we've done the tangent thing. Look at that, brings it back. So So obviously working in that field, how did you get into working in that field in the first place?
It was one of those. I never really had. I don't have a lot of future foresight per se. There's not really much intention sometimes to the direction I take, which I think sometimes has acted in my benefit. Well, in this case, it definitely did. So when I turned 18, I had this whole impulse that I wanted to move away, wanted to move to Brighton, get into a line of work that was kind of suitable for me to be engagement and chatting to people, but not punching numbers or doing anything that destroys my soul, which is most things, unfortunately. Which is not to say that it's bad at all. It's just me. It's just how I work. But the first role that I was in a very complex mental health, and it was with almost absolutely no training whatsoever. Bear in mind, I was 18. I'd been expelled from school. I experimented with drugs and with all kinds of stuff around 15 onwards to 18. So my life was already a bit of a crazy kind of thing, and I just was like, "Whoa, okay, let's go for it." This new city I was in was I was in Brighton in the UK. Anyone that knows it, it's a bit of a party atmosphere anyway.
Quite tame.
It's pretty tame. Tame.
It's like nice, quiet seaside town, isn't it?
Oh yeah. You can hear the seagulls.
People go there to retire. Oh wait, no, that's Southport where I live.
Yeah. It's more like seagulls and jungle music mostly. And so I worked in this care place where we were doing residential support for individuals with severe mental health. So that ranged from, which I, by the way, think is a very weird term anyway. That was what was given to me when I adopted the role. So as an example, one individual was a young autistic non-verbal man. Which I wouldn't consider to be severe mental health. It kind of depends on your framing of it, obviously. Yeah. And then there was an individual who was paranoid schizophrenic who had tried to kill his sister. And I was, 20 years younger than this individual, supporting somebody who was cognitively completely there, very conscious, very very eloquent with words, but obviously had this really complicated thing. Unfortunately, that really didn't work out. Like, it ended up impacting me massively. I'm very spongy with my environment. So when people are in crisis, it impacts me quite a lot. And I kind of hold a lot of that stuff. And I ended up going into crisis a little ways into that role. And I just was like, I can't do any of this. And I ended up moving back into my parents for a while. And then when I moved back to Brighton, like maybe a year or so later, and I ended up working at a college where I was working in residential support, and it was primarily with young autistics. The college was dressed as this whole behaviors that challenge specialist. So the idea was that obviously a lot of individuals had, as I say, behaviors that challenge. So behaviors that are seen to be challenging by support workers, whatever that is, where that could be just like, no, so we're just going to go for a walk now. No. To getting our heads kicked in, like, on a daily basis. And that severity changed and escalated rapidly over my time. And as much as I fell in love with it, it became an unfortunate, massive trauma in my life. I suffered 6 or 7 quite severe head injuries during that role. I had my ribs broken. I had a chunk bitten out my shoulder, all kinds of stuff. And I had to trauma bond with my colleagues. And obviously, like, I know you've talked a little bit around this before and stuff, and it's like, it's powerful, but it's not healthy necessarily. So, and friends of ours were, being hospitalized on a daily. So, I was working with an individual getting hurt, having a hard time. And then I was like, oh, I was meant to change over with my friend. Where is he? Oh, he's gone to A&E. And so it was this huge cycle of, like, really, really difficult things for me personally, for my mental health. But within that, I learned thousands of different things around neurodiversity, around regulation, sensory therapy, OT support, speech and language. I learned Makaton on the job, which is why when people were talking, I end up signing like this all the time. It's just kind of ingrained into me now, which I think is a really great thing. And I would argue that at least Makaton should be introduced to every school ever as a communicational flexibility thing. Like, and And so much that I took away from it. Like, so there are so many amazing and wonderful moments and positive things that I really took away from it. And I think it really has addressed everything that I kind of stand for within my stream community, with everything I do work-wise now. All the practices that I put into life generally, I think have been largely kind of echoed from that experience. So it's huge for me.
That's amazing, and I know I always do this, but like I just want to thank you for the work that you do there, and you continue to do, and you have done along the way. You know, I know you may not have had the foresight of wanting to get into it. It might not have been what you set out to do, but you did it. And whether you planned to do it or you didn't plan to do it, you did it, and that's what matters. And I think that was one of the first things when because before I heard you on Faces stream, I was just like, oh yeah, he's this cool beatboxer, isn't he? Like, which you are. But then I was just like, and I heard you talk about you know, working with young autistic people and what you've done, and you talked in quite a lot of detail about the different types of communication there and learning that. And it's like, as well, being in that position, it's very hard, especially, I think a lot of people don't realize, you know, how hard it is to be in a position of helping people that it kind of seems like they don't want your help. And people don't often make the distinction, especially when a person's in crisis, they think a person doesn't want their help. And it's not that a person doesn't want the help, it's that a person is unable to accept the help, or a person has had people try and help them before and been actually more harmful than helpful. And it's also the person is not, you know, in enough of a degree of emotional regulation to accept the help. And it's very difficult to be in that situation and actually sit there and go, okay, I offered help to this person, I got either my hand slapped back or got my shoulder bit, and you know, it's whatever, and then go. And people often, I mean, I've had this when people try and help me when I'm symptomatic, and I'm just like, you know, I kind of either need leaving alone, or there's basically my brain, the bipolar part of my brain that likes to put me down and tell me all of the things, press all of my buttons. It's in there saying way worse things to myself than it would ever say to anybody else, but it still saves a few little price numbers for the person that's trying to help me, despite the fact that, you know, actually they are trying to help me. And I know it's very hard for people to accept that. Like, you know, it's something I've learned over time, is not to treat not to expect a person in crisis to act like they're not to expect them to have that extra level and that extra layer available. And actually, if you're the one who's in the position where you're coherent and you're emotionally regulated as much as any of us are, to be able to be the one to give that extra 10%, even when it seems like they don't want it. But yeah, so I've got nothing but respect for like the work you do, because, you know, I've not been in that exact same situation as you, but I've been in situations where I've been trying to help people that are symptomatic, and I've known that you totally and utterly, in that you have to 100% put this person isn't treating me very nicely to one side, and which, being an empathetic person like we both are as well, is also quite difficult, because you end up feeling what they're feeling, and so on and so forth.
And guess what? You hold that.
That's one thing I think I've got much better at, is not holding it to as long. And I think the Life a Day project did that for me, basically, because it's funny. I'm much better at being there for other people than I am for myself, learning to catch up with how to be good for myself these days. But back then it was like, I can't take, if let's say, for even now, not even a Life a Day, let's say someone comes into the stream right now and asks me a difficult question, or pushes, or actually comes in and trolls me, right? Let's say they've come in and troll me, or someone comes in and tells me something that's particularly, you know, difficult to deal with. And I've got a policy, as most of my community know, that if someone comes in and tells and basically, I refuse to call it trauma dumping, but that's what people know it as. If someone comes and opens up about something like beyond what some people in community might feel is appropriate, I'm like, that's on me. Like, now, when I say that's on me, that means that the next person that opens up about something, why are the gardeners here today of all days? If I'm going to have to fully close my window.
It's getting hard in here.
It's all right. Me, I won't get banned off Twitch because my nipples are below the. Actually, no, they're not. They're totally on camera right now.
Oh yeah, they were right. I saw.
But what I used to think of back then is it wasn't fair for me to continue carrying that into the next person. So if I was speaking to 10 people in one day, which quite often happened in the first couple of years because I was really trying to get the hours in back then, which was both a good and a bad idea. but I could have someone basically come on to me. I had one day, the hardest day, I think, of like two hardest days of my entire time doing that was I had 3 suicidal people in one day. And I had 7 people who were sexually assaulted in one day. 6 girls, 1 guy, all of them sexually assaulted by men. So that day, I remember it was a Monday. I remember it like distinctly because 4 of them I saw face to face as well. The other 3 were on a phone.
Wow.
And basically, it was the thing is I couldn't let the 7th person know that was the 7th person I've dealt with that problem today. I couldn't let the 2nd person know that day that I'm already dealing with holding on to someone else's from the hour before, like of talking about it. I had to kind of like put all of that to one side to be there for that person. And then I crashed really hard at the end of the day, obviously, but it was always that thing of that the person, the same as kind of what I tried to do with the mental health marathon is like, yeah, that might have been my 26th guest, but I was the first person they were talking to today. I totally and utterly nearly fell asleep on Mountie, who was my 26th guest though, but that's okay. And that's
he would have carried the stream on happily, I think.
Well, yeah, he'd have had to because the end stream button's at my end, and he couldn't end it. He'd just be like, Dave, are you all right? I don't know why I'm going to Cockney for him because my Brummie accent's not working today. Right, Gav. It's Dave. But yeah, so yeah, we do hold all of that, and yeah, I think one of the techniques that I learned, like that, as what you said earlier, nearly set me off again when you said that my internal environment is the bit that I ruminate on and that I can't let go of. My external environment, it's like. And it was like, you've actually, this might end up in a tweet later for all I know, which is like, I don't really give too much. I can forget about the outside world pretty easy because I'm too busy thinking about the inside world. But it does resonate a hell of a lot. Now they're at that side, so now I've got to close that door as well. I am going to drip in a second. Right. Where did beatboxing come into all of this?
So I've been beatboxing for 14 odd years, I think now. And then musically, like it was always again, it was like vocal stimming. It was always just like hobby-esque and just really, really fun and all these kind of things. And it wasn't until I was working in that environment again and at the same time was when I was kind of finding my feet into performing. So I was performing live looping and I was performing with bands and doing all these other things. And I was like getting the biggest highs, the biggest catharsis I've ever experienced in my life, no matter what I'd gone through or what I'd done to, put in my body or whatever. Music, performing on stage was the biggest thing ever. And so when I got into working in this environment, I was always known, like really, really known for not being able to shut up, even like in certain situations when it probably would have been a little bit easier. However, like I found so much goodness in working in that area. So there's a technique in particularly working with nonverbal autistics called intensive interaction, which I love. And basically it's mimicry. Basically it's echolalia. Basically it's you sit down and communicate in the exact way that this individual is communicating. Obviously some people think of it as a bit of like a condescending approach. Some individuals that are sort of try to assume more capacity than there kind of maybe is evidence of and things like that. But realistically with it, I loved it because you had individuals who had such broad vocal range in their stimming and the way they interacted with the world. And I was just mimicking that on a level and then physically stimming with them and all these things. And we ended up getting levels of trust and communication that were, in sometimes otherwise not thought of as being possible. there was a lot of individuals that came into our support that were, we had an individual, obviously, I can't go into much detail around it, who was 3-to-1 in the community. That means they were at really high risk to themselves and to others in an environment when they went into crisis. And we had the best relationship because she loved my sound, and she would just go, she developed a thing with me where she'd catch my eye across the room and go, "Pwah!" And I'd just be like, or something like that back, and she would just absolutely love it. And it was not really an interaction that was common in her life. She didn't really do that with many people, so it became this really wonderful thing. And so within that, I started learning from OT supports and things like that about self-regulation techniques, and we started getting into like more the meditative and the mindful and all this stuff. So we were talking like intentional breathing. We're talking about activated breathing and stuff like that. And within beatboxing, there's loads of that. So when I do workshops, when I do lessons, every single session that I start with, we start with a self-regulation warm-up thing, which basically is the whole part is 3 steps. You work on the breath, your vocal folds, and your activators. But the breath was the most important one because it just puts people into that seat. Like when you're sort of sat, like particularly doing it over Zoom and stuff, it's like, okay, like a little bit uncomfortable. All like, can I get the camera working? All like, are we all good? Like, can you hear me? It's like, okay, let's calm. Let's bring ourselves down. Like, let's bring that level down. And I never really realized that it could be such a tool in like beyond its musical contribution or whatever to the world. And so obviously when this self-regulation stuff kind of started getting kicked in, I actually did some research on some guys in the States who have started something called beatbox therapy. And the idea around beatbox therapy is that it regulates speech and language and sort of sonic therapies together. So the idea was that, so from the lowest range to the highest range in terms of like verbal capacity, should we say, you can integrate using phonics in repetition to aid with speech and language, which is basically is the fundamentals. It's being able to be like buh, 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 just using repetitive motion and all these kind of things to like really activate the voice. And then the other thing was using tones, which the human voice can do to self-soothe and to self-regulate or to raise your energy up as well, which is always just a great thing. Like being able to be like whoop, whoop, and all these kind of things is really, really good for you. Like, and obviously people in so many capacities think it's an unusual thing to kind of practice and stuff like that, because it's like, okay, well, are you encouraging words or not? And it's like, well, no, you're encouraging the level that individual is working at. And if you can go any further, that's amazing. Yeah. But every part of it is important. Every single step is important, because the individual can't say more than da 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 or something. Doesn't mean that they're not communicating. So you're really like drawing in on that. Yeah. And I'm a massive believer that beatbox is a communication, it's an expression. Sorry, you were gonna...
No, it's just something you've just said just made something click for me. I'm sure you must be familiar with the story of the film that I watched that basically was what brought me back after my suicide attempt, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly.
I remember you bringing this up. I haven't seen it, no.
So the thing is, it's a true story, and it's a guy who's got locked-in syndrome, and he communicates with a nurse through a series of blinking. And what you just said then is like, if you could, like, the thing is, what that nurse does is that nurse sits down and takes the time to construct a new alphabet, and his blinks basically instruct her on where to move with it. And as a result, that was able to be made into a book, and that book was then able to be made into a film. Okay. Now I'm just a little bit too much emotionally now, but I'll try and finish what I'm trying to say. All I was thinking of then was like, with those kids that, or even adults, that's what they can make in terms of sounds. Those sounds mean something. And actually, in the same way that I just said before, of not expecting the person who has the lower capacity to do all the work, in terms of the person who's emotionally in crisis, not expecting them to do all the work, doing the extra work yourself. These kids, it's like, they can't say to you, by the way, when I say and it's that many times, it means this. They can't say that. But if someone else is actually willing to go the extra mile and do that extra bit of work for them, they could probably find that there's a pattern. They could probably help that person to turn what they've got now into a communication that works for them. And yeah, okay, it might mean that only 4 or 5 people in that person's life can understand them and can follow what that communication is. Only that nurse could probably, I think the nurse actually goes on to teach his wife, and maybe even the kids are maybe a little bit young, but I think maybe the nurse goes on to teach his wife to do it as well in the film, if I recall correctly. It was just that bloody line, only a shadow, even a sliver of a dad is still a dad. That, like, I don't remember much of the film after that, to be honest. That was like rocked me to my very core. But and miraculously, I've never gone back and rewatched it, and I don't know if I ever could, actually, weirdly. But like, I think, you know, even if only 4 people know what that communication is, maybe the person's support worker knows it and then teaches that to one, like, you know, parents or sibling or best friend, whatever it is, that's 4 more people. One more person is one more person than could understand you a minute ago, or a day ago, 6 months ago, however long it takes to do it. And yeah, it's like, I remember you saying that, you know, that is their form of communication. And actually, it's down to us, the ones that have got a little bit more cognitive ability or capacity, to go, okay, what does that communication mean? Because they can't tell us what it means.
This is exactly it. Like, like you saying exactly what I was thinking. Just, that's like only 4 people. That's a perspective change. I can't believe 4 people. That's incredible. At one point in this individual's life, they may have been no one.
Yeah.
Like, and there's so many cases that you see where there's a disconnect from family. There's a disconnect from regular support, particularly in behaviors of challenge, particularly in individuals that have been bumped around to different specialists to do all these different things, and then they've had to try new approaches and unpick what had just been going through and all these things, and it's exactly like you say, it can literally take one individual time to really get that connection and uncode that, and to be able to be like, look, you don't understand this in the way that we throw it around, but you're seen, you're heard, I'm listening to you, I'm here with you. When you're in crisis, I'm not smiling because that's just creepy. But I'm straight. I'm here with you. You haven't ruined our relationship in any other way because of something that you have no control over, or that you feel is a communication in and of itself. I mean, like, this is a huge thing that we always say around nonverbal individuals, is that, well, the reason you were hit is pretty much never malicious. So you can always take that out of the equation. And when you were able to take that in and kind of accept that as truth, it really changes your perspective on how people behave generally anyway, verbal or non-verbal. And so when it is like, no, I'm really trying to request this one thing. I'm in pain. My stomach hurts. Nobody knows. Nobody can understand that I'm trying to communicate this. I've had demands put on me. I've been asked to drink this drink or eat this food that I can't eat right now. I'm feeling horrible. I need to go to the toilet, but I need consent to do that, because obviously there's so many times in capacity where it's like, well, we've trained young people in certain environments. Some environments there it's like, I don't want to say the name of the practice because it is just like slander. Basically, I'm very against it. But the practice that works with young people is basically dog training. It's basically like, here's a treat. So if you don't do this, or if you do this, you will have a reward system, and then you will have an isolation or a punishment system as well. It's like, that's fucked up. Like, I never ever will ever agree with that. And it just spins back round to this, that everyone communicates. Like, whether you can speak, whether you can move, all these kind of different things. Like you say, locked-in syndrome, for example. I worked with some individuals in Australia with locked-in syndrome, and individuals that were, I think the most function was, again, like you said, with the eyes. So is this ability to communicate with simple eye movements and things like that. And the way that they were inclusive with that, which I think it was an amazing practice, the place that they had there for it. Instead of giving no control to that individual, every single thing could be a choice, because, okay, you can move your eyes, you can choose right now whether or not this is what you want, and we can listen to you. Just because you are unable to move or unable to speak for yourself does not mean you don't have a voice of your own. we are here ready to listen, and we are training ourselves to be able to listen better. And that's how it should always be. And like, it's like you do always within mental health support and crisis support. There's always new things to listen to learn about, new traits, new terms, new things that make it so hard. It's like, you always amaze me because your wealth of knowledge within diagnoses support and neurodiversity, on top of suicide prevention, on top of sexual assault, like talking people through sexual assaults, talking people through physical traumas in general, like that is a well of knowledge and communication styles that like is so unique to find any one individual who can have that, let alone a whole system that is meant to be for that doesn't have it. Have you got your tissues? Yeah,
they're right here.
Loving the chat. Loving the chat.
The thing is that, like, I know how I find hello.
Do you want a drink?
Can I have top up on my water, please?
I'll have one, please.
But I don't know. I always find it really weird accepting those kind of compliments. Not because I don't think I deserve it, because I do think I can do all of that. But the thing is, and I don't know if this is, this is probably me being mean to other people more. I'm just like, the most of this stuff was like really obvious. Like as soon as it's pointed out to me, it was kind of obvious. It's like actually weird. I was interviewing Metafish a few weeks back, and basically he was like, took up meditation and it just worked. And he had all these epiphany moments where things just worked. But for me, when you say all of those different things, they're not different things. Like I know they're different traumas, but trauma, it's underpinned by the same sort of things. It's underpinned by something happened to me. Basically, okay. Actually, I'm going to try and put this carefully because it's going to make me sound like an arsehole if I get this bit wrong. But it's like, okay, my job is knowing that there's enough patterns there and there's enough similarities to be able to help person quickly, and then also knowing to never discount the individualities of what they say. Those two things together. So. If someone's been through sexual assault, it will make them feel significantly different than a person who's been through physical assault. Maybe actually it'll feel exactly the same. Thank you. Maybe it will feel like emotionally. It's not what happened. Actually, isn't what happened is the most important thing for the story and for the person's validation. But it's the least important thing for where to go from there, because. Oh God! I had a thought of this, and I was really going to neatly package this up in a thing, and it's just totally and utterly gone. It's totally and utterly gone. It's because actually, because the most important thing is how it made the person feel, and then it's processing those emotions. And actually, the reason you feel an emotion might be diverse, but the number of emotions isn't as diverse. So as a result, helping a person through grief, whether that is grief over their own lost youth, or whether it is grief over losing somebody, or whether it's grief over losing a pet, is the thing is I treat it all the same but all unique at the same time. And I think it's the same with people, like I think there's so much being lost now in whether we argue over whether we're all the same or we're all different, when the answer is both. We all have similarities. There are things that make me and you similar. We're actually quite a good match. We're nearly a Venn. Our Venn diagram's nearly a circle. We're basically a cuddle. But like, and that was the thing I found with the mental health marathon that I really loved, and Helen pointed it out, which was like, we're all different, but we're all the same, and it's the fact that we're all different that makes us the same and stuff. And it's a few small principles, and to me, none of them seem like rocket science. So I don't I don't get when people don't get it. Well, I'll give an example of this. When Wreck-It Raven was on, and we talked about racism, and basically what I try and do as a super duper privileged cis white male is try and figure out, okay, if I understand racism, if Wreck-It Raven's explaining racism to me and I understand it, how as a cis white male do I understand it so I can hopefully help other cis white males understand it? And I'm like, okay, right, I don't understand racism because I've never lived through it. However, what Raven was saying was about generational stuff and about how mental health within the Black community is treated as it's treated as you've got to kind of suck it up and get on with it. It's not talked about. And the reason being for that is because if you, as a slave, if you were to ever show weakness, you would be beaten and or killed for that. So you learn not to do that. Now, for completely and utterly less barbaric reasons, the older generations of our sweet country over here had the stiff upper lip. They didn't talk about things. They had the stalwart thing, right? And that was passed down to them. And it's like, but people don't see it. It's like, it's the thing is, if I was to open up about my mental health, no one else, or if I was to open up about something I was bullied about at school, right? So I had glasses when I was a kid. I was also quite big when I was a kid. So I got bullied about the glasses first, then I got bullied about being overweight. No one would ever say to me, "Are you sure you're not just being too sensitive?" Like no one would ever say that to me. Are you sure they were bullying you because of your glasses? Yeah, they called me Four Eyes. Yeah, but are you sure that's because of your glasses? No one would gaslight me like that. And I try, and the same, and it's like, but whereas like if someone used a racial slur against Raven or against anyone else of the Black community, people would be like, "Oh yeah, but are you sure they were being racist? Are you sure?" And like to me,
right,
I'm like, how are we still arguing this stuff? Like I don't like. It's funny that like I can get my head around some really complex shit, and that baffles the crap out of me. The fact that there it is, it's clear cut, it's obvious, open and shut case. How are we still arguing over this stuff? The fact that we still are baffles me. So yeah, I've just gone. It's me doing all the tangents. I'm taking totally full responsibility for this now.
I feel like a tangent of allyship is a completely avo fucking tangent to have, to be honest. Like, I'm a big believer in this myself, and I think it's important to talk about because it's like, it's just as you say, it's like, how can I as a cis white man to educate other people or other people who are cis white men or something like that? And it's like, so we're not educate, but we can uplift the individuals that are already doing all of that activism and educating people on that in that way. And the basic decency as we could do is educate ourselves on it and know what the reality of those boundaries are, what the reality of the perspective of what people are having to go through on the daily. And I mean, it's like, it's again, we talk passionate. I mean, we both talk passionately around LGBTQIA plus communities as well, and how very much that kind of gaslighting and bullshit stuff and gatekeeping and stuff has kind of occurred within that. And it's so important to just be like, just because you don't necessarily resonate or feel like you belong in an individual community like that, doesn't mean that you shouldn't know about it and you shouldn't listen to people about it and learn about it. So important. Yes. It's the same with the neurodivergent thing. It's like, don't be like, basic ableism is not accepting or listening to differently abled voices. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is fundamental ableism. Like on a baseline is just like doing the seer thing. Really, it's just like kind of like, okay, we're gonna talk about individuals without including any of the people that it relates to in the discussion, and it's just like, well, that's fucking pointless then.
Yeah,
it's absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
I know you're a big believer in that.
Yeah, absolutely huge. Okay, right. So we've talked about who you are as a human, as an alien. Sorry. We've talked about the work that you did and how you came and how this kind of led to your own discoveries about neurodiversity. We talked about what role beatboxing played in all of this. Let me see, where was I up to? Okay, so let's go into we'll go into what the stream is and what the stream stands for, and then what we'll do is we'll then call the podcast to a time there, and then we'll just go and chat to a bunch of people.
Are we not 20 minutes over it already?
We're only 4 minutes over it. So 45 to 60. Okay. So basically, what is the spaceship? What is your stream? What do you stand for? Because you say that you don't have much foresight, but you know what you stand for.
I do know what I stand for. I think a big part of this is like I talk about a value system quite a lot. And I've adopted, I feel like it was already in my space before we even met, but appropriate vibes apply or only.
I never realized that actually abbreviated to avocado to Avo for ages.
Oh, it's so good. I love that. So the spaceship to me, so originally it became a platform where I could practice relentlessly without needing to move on from another act or whatever, musically, and then develop myself that way. I started finding my voice that way. I started reading poetry online that way. I started then talking much, much more vulnerably about myself. I do believe I don't want to put it in quotes, I very nearly did that. The first mental health stream or focus stream that I ever did was when I was recently bereaved. And obviously, for those of you that are, that know me, that saw my last one, I talk about that quite passionately. It's a very big part of my life is bereavement. I've experienced a lot of loss, so it's a big thing for me. And my friend had passed away the week previously, and I did not have capacity, so I shared. Not unrelentingly. I shared without any worry or guard. I shared while completely being held and seen by individuals I'd never met, by people that came into my chat that all I knew of them really was a moniker, was their username, and they held me and they saw it and they shared their own stuff, and it was an amazing space. And then obviously yours became a massive inspiration within that. And so originally I've since changed the name of it, but I decided that I really wanted my stream, regardless of my content, whatever it was to be a mental health safe space, which I've now later changed to Brave Space, because ultimately it kind of
so much
which I could explain.
I didn't know that was a permanent change either. I thought okay.
So no, it was so the two functions of it was that it's implication, it is semantics, it's not necessarily rules, but the point was that you can't necessarily protect everyone from being triggered in a discussion where you talk about vulnerable things.
Yep.
Of course. And the other one is that it also implies that other places are not safe. And that is just not true. And that was the big thing for me, was like, okay, you can take these sharing principles, these wonderful things, these things that you learn from individuals, and you can elevate them into your life. That doesn't mean that you have to wait until 4 hours every single week to rotate before you can share and be open again and feel brave and feel safe and all these things. So that was a huge part. And so for the longest time, I was doing a lot of stuff where it was like, I would do music that was a kind of a very direct contrast. So it'd be like, I do the chillest of the chill, and then the most cathartic mental music I can possibly think of, with all the kind of crazy stuff going on. And it reflects me a lot. Like it's interesting, because in the idea of a binary or a bipolar kind of attitude, I think it really I really resonate with that. I feel like mania and kind of being more subdued is like a very big part of my cycle, my neurodivergent trait. So with the stream, it ended up being that I now have the 3 parts, which is, one of them is meant to be more about just chilling out and making music and having a good time, and the other one is like, let's go mental and let's go flop your weird out and be strangers and all this stuff and celebrate like peculiarities. And one of the things that I found quite early on, when Twitch was adjusting all their tags and stuff, was that if I put a space in Weird Stay, which is my cathartic stream, Twitch didn't accept weird. as a comment. And I was like, oh. So effectively, they believed it was like an ableist thing or something like that. I'm not really sure where that boundary came in, but I was like, yeah, fuck that. I'm going to re-own this. Like, weird is everything. Weird is anything. Like, I celebrate uniqueness always and will always do that. And I think it's just a big thing for me. So within that, it became a huge factor for me to be able to be like, I make strange music for strange people. For people that love that kind of stuff, then you're welcome here. If you're not into that stuff, you'll probably find something that you do like at some point, I'm sure. And so when we got to the third part, which was the brave spacing, it has just every single time, it's the one that I feel, I don't know how, you're much more experienced, particularly in the streaming environment, doing this as well. It was the most apprehension I had, because I know what I am. I know how I can perform, and I can, make music and do all these things. But how can I respond respectfully and with some ounces of wisdom to all these different attributes that came in? And I realized I didn't have to, because it was a community thing. So like, I might be the one sat there on screen hosting a stream, but ultimately it was a collective unification thing. Everyone was allowing people to be heard. Everyone was allowing people to be seen. Like the values extended from, 3-4 viewers to however many my maximum will be. And it became an amazing feeling that I know that if I just like you, if I'm behind chat and I'm spending time focusing, I don't have to worry or stress about what's coming next, because I know people have got it. I know people are seeing it and they're responding to it, or they're, if it's an unnecessary trolling, they might decide to boop it or whatever. But like, ultimately, it was a time where I could self-regulate. I could untangle the ball of wool in my own mind, and simultaneously listen to others and do the same. And I think it's a really great thing, because I've done a bit of stuff within group spacing, so like group sharing circles and things like that. And like turn taking is fantastic. It's lovely. It's tricky for neurodivergence, like really tricky. Like
in the first page of one of my notebooks from one of my courses, it basically says, "Patience, your time will come." Because I just didn't, because people often speak over me, and I don't like speaking over people because I feel like I've upset people when I do that. But at the same time, I've got manners with neurodivergence they don't go well together.
This is how I feel. You've said this to me before. You were like, you can be very patient for somebody who is like around that sort of area. And it was like, that's learned. That is massively learned. Like, it was like being shamed and all these different things, and having all these kind of attributes that really like enforce that. But what I believe with the Twitch space stuff with chat rooms is that people can take as long as they need to articulate a response, and they can simultaneously listen to others. So they aren't sat there like, what am I going to say next, while, sort of half blocking out what an individual is sharing.
Yeah.
And so you end up with these like corresponding stuff, like all these corresponding views or stories and things that come in, and people will come in for the very first time and they haven't met anyone, and they go, oh, is it cool to share? Like, it's not and I'm with you. I hate the words trauma dumping. It's just awful. Like, I don't believe in it. And it's just like, well, no, actually, and it's like you say, we're responsible for that. Like, I opened the door, mate. Like, if you want to walk in and fall into a puddle on the floor, you're not going to just be looked at until you leave. Like, that's just not it. Like, we are in a virtual space, of course, but we're still going to listen. We're still going to see you. And, you can't help it if some individuals might be like, oh, it's a bit much or something. It's like, well, no, it's completely appropriate. It's completely allowed. It's completely acceptable. Everyone is valid. And people go through all sorts of stuff in life. Like, the last thing you need is to walk into somewhere and just be rejected.
Yeah. I'm sorry to everybody out there who doesn't need help, but I'd rather the person who doesn't need help leave than the person who does. And that's it. That's the most succinct I think I've ever said it. And that's the whole thing. Is like, I'm a mental health stream. Don't get me wrong. I'm a really frigging entertaining mental health stream. but it's like, but the mental health is primary thing. I often say to people, the way I say is I'm a mental health variety streamer, and I say it in that order because mental health comes first and variety comes second, or maybe not at all. Totally. You're gonna get mental health. And I think the thing is that as well, the person who doesn't need help is actually more in a position to be able to accept that. They're more in a position to be able to say, actually, I understand that Dave's there for the person that needs the help the most. There's obviously a grey area. There's people that are like, have got the capacity but are a little bit on the edge themselves and various things in chat. And I'm like, I'm okay. Like, if people need to leave, I'm okay with that. It's like, I remember once, right, quite early on, asking my mods, because some of my mods struggled with the types of conversation. I'm like, if you're struggling with the conversation, don't even tell me. Like, yeah, don't tell. Like, if you need to leave, but don't tell me you're leaving, because the way I come from a background of doing this in face to face. You know, I did this face to face for years. I ran a support group for years before I did this. And if in the middle of someone opening up, another person had stood up and said, I can't handle this, I'm leaving. I'm like, think about what that would do to the person who's there and opening up. And it's like, and no one really wants to do that. And I understand, but like, I think I love the fact that you've made the adaptation of saying from safe to brave, because we can't keep every single person safe. We just can't. And also, we don't necessarily want them to be safe 100% of the time, because safety is your comfort zone. Safety is, I want to validate 100%. I think validation is the most important thing you can do for anybody. Like, but as I've always said, mine isn't that I don't just say I accept that your problems are valid. I say I accept that your problems are valid, but I also accept that your ability to overcome them is too. Your problems may be big, but you're bigger. Your problems may be strong, but you're stronger. Your problems may be scary, but you're scarier. You got this. And that's the message that I want to put out there. So I won't just stop at validation. And look, again, there might be people out there that think I'm wrong. And the one thing I actually don't like the most, it's not the people. I don't like the use of the phrase trauma dumping. But what I don't like is on Streamer Twitter, and Streamer Twitter doesn't know I exist yet, so it's more than welcome to come at me if it wants. But I don't think Streamer Twitter knows I exist yet, because it doesn't get me into it. I don't get dragged into Twitter drama. It's when people say, don't do this in streams, not don't do this in my stream. Don't do this in streams. I'm like, I'm sorry. Are you making the decision unilaterally for all of us? It's like, don't trauma dump in streams. It's like, I'm like, and I don't want to kind of kick the hornet's nest in this particular one. But every single time I see one of them, I'm like, excuse me, can you just not speak for all streamers, please? Because what gives you the audacity? And I wouldn't sit here and say that all mental health chats should be open, should be brave, should be whatever. I don't have the audacity to say that. I don't have the authority to say that. And I would never pretend to or claim to. So I do get really, really, really irritated. And as a result, I don't engage with that, because I wouldn't engage in it in a nice way, because I just want to turn around and say, look, stop it. Stop saying. And the problem is, there's some pretty big streamers that say that. And it's like,
I know it.
And it's like, oh, but like, but they're like, we're not qualified to do this. And even the people that shouldn't be. Like, not shouldn't be qualified, but shouldn't be doing it. So like people like Dr. Mick Live, who is actually a licensed therapist, right? Really? Okay, he's not actually doing one-to-one therapy. So what are you saying, that peer support networks shouldn't exist? Is that what you're saying as well, or just they shouldn't exist on Twitch? But it's funny. It's like I don't get it, because they're trying. The people that say that, they're trying to protect the strongest in the community whilst alienating the I'm not going to finish that sentence. I was going to say the weakest, the ones that are in the most trouble, the ones that are struggling, the ones that are up against the odds the most, because they're not the weakest. The ones that are in those positions are not fucking weak. As I've said a million times, you are not weak. The journey is just difficult. They are facing a difficult journey. So they're actually protecting the people who are actually on the most level footing right now, at the expense of the people who are not.
Absolutely. And if anything, if we're gonna become activists within that and alienated from Twitch streamer, then fuck them. Because I'm not gonna change that. There's no, oh yeah, I'm on 300 viewers average streamer that's shown to say these are the values you should apply to every stream. Don't let anyone do this, and that. It's just oh, sorry, don't tell me what to do. No, I
don't like generalizations in general.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I don't like generalizations. I don't like even the one that sometimes the mental health community doesn't like me disagreeing with. I can't stand it when people say I was watching Ozark this morning and I found another bipolar character. Turns out that I loved him before they disclosed he was bipolar anyway. But it's I've got another bipolar character that I can now watch and scrutinize whether they did it well. I actually don't care. Weirdly, I don't care if they do bipolar characters well or not, because I'm it's entertainment, and I don't think people should be getting their education from films. But that's another story entirely. I understand. I accept that representation is important, but I accept that the only way you're ever going to get true representation, and we've talked about this before, of neurodivergence in films, is if you cast an entirely neurodivergent cast and say, which we should do anyway, and say this is what neurodivergence can have, and even with 500 of them in one cast, this is still only a small portion of us. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, they've gone down the dangerous route, which obviously they go with Carrie and Underworld. They go down the genius route. With DeLuca and Grey's Anatomy, they go down the dangerous genius route. So they go down both sides. Actually, dangerous genius for all of them. Actually, so far. Well, maybe that's me. Maybe I'm a dangerous genius.
Great comic character though. Dangerous genius.
Dangerous genius.
It's perfect archetype, isn't it?
Dangerous genius. Here he comes to save and destroy the day.
You got the Hulk, you got Iron Man. They're all dangerous geniuses.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how they created Ultron.
Yeah.
No one was griping at them. But yeah. So what I was saying, I suppose, about that is that bipolar characters. And the argument that I can't stand the argument that people with mental health are dangerous, right? I also can't stand the argument that people with mental health aren't dangerous. I'm how about there's dangerous people with mental health? There's dangerous people without mental health issues. There's perfectly safe and amazing, wonderful people with mental health issues, and there's perfectly safe. There's everything in between. It's basically, it's people with mental health don't lie, except for a liar with mental health. That's like saying people with mental health aren't French, except for French people with mental health. And it's the problem is
no, there's none. I can't. There's no French people with mental health.
No, Gerard Depardieu depressed. But it's the problem is with these arguments, I understand where they're coming from. I totally and utterly understand where they're coming from. Saying people with mental health aren't dangerous. I understand where that's coming from. The problem is it's the same as the type of drug education that you and I had as kids. And I'll quote the guy from the Amy Winehouse Foundation that was on months ago. If you take this, you will die. It's and the second that you don't die off having your first spliff, it's oh, everything they said was a lie. And actually, no. When it comes to drugs, a lot of what they said was the truth. The problem is they put so many other lies in there to scare you that when you see past one lie, you expect that they're lying about absolutely everything. So you go off and you experiment to high heavens. Emphasis on high. But and that's the problem, is that when you say that people with mental health aren't dangerous, all it takes is one person to be dangerous and have mental health. And again, people are well, you said that people without mental health aren't dangerous. And as middle groundy and centrist and friggin' hard to sell on a billboard somewhere as it might be, if we just accept that actually there are dangerous people with mental health, there are also non-dangerous people with mental health, the same as there are with people that don't have mental health issues. The second we expect that basically a person with mental health is a person, and they are capable of pretty much everything that a person is capable of. And rather than then blame the mental health being the reason or whatever it might be, it's I want to get someone on I'm probably going to see if Sam Walkden, the PhD Samantha, psych up your life on TikTok. I might see if she'll come back on to tell me the difference between narcissistic personality disorder and a narcissist, because if there's one phrase that's actually thrown around a hell of a lot right now, quite wrongly in a lot of places, it's the word narcissist. And I think that's another little topic that we need to delve into. But hey, that's a topic for a different day. Beat Cleaver. We're only 25 minutes over.
Nailed it.
Where's the best place for people to find you? We'll shout you out on Twitch on here in a second. So it's twitch.tv/beat_cleaver. We'll have a clickable link in chat. But for anyone who's listening on the podcast, where are the best places to find you and more about what you do?
Twitch and most social media. So I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Obviously, everyone is frustrated with it because my Twitter is backwards, but it's Cleaver_Beat on Twitter. Instagram is Beat_Cleaver, and Facebook's just Beat Cleaver. But you can find me in your local skies in any part of the universe. Really, it just depends on what time of day you fancy it. But
he's that shining thing left of Venus.
Yeah, primarily you'll find me on Twitch. I stream regularly up on Twitch. Yeah.
Amazing. Right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being on. I'm going to leave it there for the podcast, and we're going to go back to chat.